Hi, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, or in Althea's case, good evening. Welcome to this next webinar in our series, How CDOs Succeed, and we are very privileged to have Althea Davis with us this evening. Althea is a board member of the International Society of Chief Data Officers, and as you can see from the slide in front of you, she's also a country ambassador to the UAE for the Society, CDO magazine, and the MIT CDO IQ Symposium, who have come together as a team, and she is our ambassador out in the UAE. You will see that she has the very impressive job title, a brand new job title, I hasten to add, of the Director of Data Practice at NXN, and she was formerly the Enterprise Government Data Governance Lead at Etihad, and I think we're going to have a lot of her experiences at Etihad brought out this evening. You should also know that Althea, although a spring chicken, has a great deal of experience in data and data governance across the world, with a lot of work in Europe, where she worked for Heineken and for ING, and so, you know, I think she has a lot of experience to bring to this webinar, and she will certainly be able to answer any of the questions that I think that you have that arise. Althea, over to you, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
And just an FYI, Althea, you may be on mute. It looks like your phone is on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Althea.
Okay, sorry about that. I think we're just technically challenged today. Good evening, everybody. Hello from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Tonight, or wherever you are, if it's day or afternoon, I would like to take you through a presentation. And this presentation is called purposefully, Your Burning Platform Has Disintegrated. And the topic is data and the aviation crisis. So as Michael just explained, I have spent the last few months in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE, working at Etihad Aviation Group. And Etihad Aviation Group is a flag carrier of the United Arab Emirates. A lot of people, of course, know Emirates Airline, which is the competing airline in the competing city of Dubai, just up the road. But I'm going to reflect on the aviation crisis and in a data leadership position before the crisis, just coming in, and during the crisis as we're still in it, but at the peak in the beginning. And I will reflect on a couple of other things regarding the environment here in the UAE. So without further ado, moderator Michael, I believe Michael's the moderator, if I can ask you to go to the next slide. Okay, Michael or somebody, if you can go to the next slide, please.
Yep, we are there. It's the response slide. Go ahead, Althea.
Okay, thank you. It's not moving for me. It's okay. So, yes, now it's moved. Okay, so the burning platform, the reason why I've shown this picture of the response, this really depicts for me what I saw happening around me. So let me take you first to what am I talking about. I entered Etihad Aviation Group very bright-eyed in January 2020. And this is, of course, about a month and a half before there were cracking signs that something serious was going on worldwide. But very quickly, by the period of let's say end February, beginning of March, it became very obvious that the corporate community, including the corporate community across the aviation sector and where I was at Etihad, it felt very much like this man feeling like the ground was just moving from under his feet. Everything had changed. The world was on its head. So I want to take you to the beginning of my story and how did that actually happen. Moderator, can I ask you to go to the next slide, please?
The message, we are there.
Yes. The message that I want to bring to you is that in the beginning, I had, and in the beginning, of course, I had a wonderful experience, and I want to tell you about that. And then I'm going to go over to what I call the naivety of the corporation in general. And then after that, I will talk about the high turbulence that everybody was feeling, why that man was feeling like that. The ground was separating between his legs. And then talking about, well, it's not quite post-COVID, but we're still looking forward in the UAE. So what is the feeling here in the country, in the aviation industry, and of course the larger strategic topics for the UAE. So first things first, I'm going to go to the beginning. So if I can ask the moderator to go to the next slide, please. The data story slide.
We are there. Data stories,
okay.
The good, bad, and the ugly.
Yes, the good, bad, and the ugly. So now I'm going to stop at this slide so the moderator's got a bit of a break because it's going to take me a time to get through this. But the good, bad, and the ugly. So with this, like I said, new year 2020, I just left an extremely comfortable position working as a successful independent consultant, walking from one client to the other as their chief data officer. And I was only about 2 months in when the COVID pandemic started in aviation. I was super excited. I took my family here and I inherited a wonderful small lean team in Etihad, and they were like excited little puppies. They were absorbing all of the data expertise that I could distill, and there was a confidence buzzing in the aviation organization that I was in. Why? Because Etihad previously, and this is of course public information, had a bit of a tough time with the previous CEO, and they were crawling out of the red. And they were very ambitious and very confident, I should say, that things were going extremely well. Apparently, January, the month that I arrived, they were well on their way back to black. So the company was very confident, nothing could not be done, and we were also going to put data at the decision-making table and rekindle it, because apparently they had a couple of times tried to get data and data management and data governance off the ground, but with very little success. And when I came in, that was all supposed to change, and everybody was positive. And within really no time, there was a very eerie feeling. By the end of February, I noticed that even though my team was very excited and we were in a digital technology and innovation department, there were some cracks coming in the bright outlook. And those cracks were coming from outside. They weren't coming from inside. So by the time, I'm moving now from the good to getting to the bad, the beginning of March, we realized that quickly as the data department, that the figures impacting the revenues and the bookings of the company were seriously impacted. and things got very gloomed extremely fast. I don't mean within weeks. I literally mean within minutes, hours, and days. And that's something that at least the senior people in the organization had said to me at the time. It was a really unbelievable nightmare they were going through. There's something that I learned about people in the aviation business. They seem to stick with aviation. So you will meet people who have been in the aviation business for more or less their entire careers. And they are super passionate about it. With that being said, like I said, things started to get extremely ugly very fast. I also had a personal kind of deja vu. But the funny thing is, and I'll just explain the deja vu, when I realized that it was extremely bad, I reflected on several years before where I stepped over from being in an extremely cozy job at Nike European headquarters in the Netherlands, in retail, big brand, only growing in 2008. And I stepped over to the financial industry, and you won't believe it, but it literally was April 1st, 2008. And at that time, I didn't really realize it, but the crisis, the financial crisis, was pretty much at its height. And at that time, I personally didn't feel it. I was a consultant, and I was able to get into a great position at one of the big banks in the Netherlands.
Sorry, Althea. Seems like we've lost your connection. Can you retry again? For folks on the call, while we just wait for Althea to retry and establish her connection again, she is dialing in from the UAE. So we're just, we had some technical difficulties beforehand, but hopefully we'll be able to get things back on track. So bear with us for a minute or two.
While she does that, Robert, she seems to have really been through the ringer in terms of joining organizations with bright outlooks, but at just the wrong time. I think it would be interesting to see if any of the attendees have got some searching questions that comes out of that perhaps might relate to their own experiences, and perhaps we'll see that when we get to questions.
Yeah, certainly, Mike. While we wait on Althea just coming back in there, if anyone does have any questions, please use the chat box to post your questions. I'm more than happy to review them at the end. So we're just giving Althea a minute just to log back in and hopefully continue on her journey, because you've left us hanging, Althea. You're in I think you're in the ugly kind of stage point at the moment. So we're hoping that it does get better. We're looking forward to hearing the next steps. So we know there's a bright outcome. It's just we're waiting on the story.
It is one of the things that I'm liking about this is just that so many of these talks are all about how brilliant everything has been and how wonderful the their experiences have been of establishing data governance. And yet I think we all know that the reality quite often is that it's not that. Not only do you have a huge sort of cultural inertia to fight against, but there are outside pressures. That's the cultural inertia within the organization. But there are outside pressures that are also fighting you. And here I don't just mean the COVID infection and its consequences, because Althea is talking about a time when, if we can remember that far back, pre-COVID, where the political pressures that existed within the country that she was operating were also seemed to be causing effects upon how she was able to deliver her job.
So we'll just do a quick check to see if Althea, can you hear us yet, or are you back online? So we're still waiting for Althea to dial in. So
I know from my experiences of talking to her on other matters that just the sheer volume of traffic over the airwaves in the UAE can cause some problems with just bandwidth and just accessibility.
Well, I do know that in talking to other chief data officers and other aviation airline industry events, that their departments have been greatly scaled back, and that seems to be, Mike, a common theme that we're seeing, is that in fact, someone was asking us earlier on today, Mike, was there any kind of information we had on the budgets and the size of the office of the CDO? And it's a very interesting discussion, because in several of the government CDOs that I've been talking about, they are certainly somewhat limited in both size and budget. And also, if there's a situation where organizations that are in a downturn, like the aviation industry, is obviously has been suffering greatly. So no doubt that their resources have been reduced greatly. So it's an interesting situation to understand how one can cope with, providing the value when the kind of budgets and teams have been cut. So
I think this is what we were those of us attending this, and I include those panelists amongst us as well, were hoping that we would sort of get this from Althea. I mean, it is all too easy for organizations to turn around and see the data governance effort within an organization as being just a cost center, if they're not actually delivering as enablers of the exploitation of data, and to cut them quite, as soon as things turn bad.
Well, therein lies the potential issue, the fact that data is the lifeblood of the organization. Everything is every organization is trying to become a data-driven organization and going through some kind of digital transformation. And I think Althea is kind of talking about that in the airline aviation industry, there certainly was a understanding that data was a heartblood. Data can tell them where they can increase their profits, where they can help cut, or improve performance or improve business outcomes. But there may be a point where there's too much kind of shock and awe with the kind of cost-cutting measures that you end up hurting the very thing that you're trying to grow that can help you improve. So, bit of a catch-22 situation.
Oh, indeed. And I was talking to a CDO just yesterday, and he's brand new in the job. Well, brand new within the last sort of few months, and already has an organization of 30. And as about a month ago, I was talking to a CDO who was going in on his own, their own. They both happen to be men, but and they were being told, the sort of singleton, that there was no likelihood in the short term of them getting any staff, and yet there was still the expectation that they were going to deliver all that we would expect, a fully formed CDO organization to deliver.
So let me just see. I see that Althea. Are you?
Hello.
Althea. Hello, Althea.
Hello.
Hello. We can hear you.
I am so sorry. You can't hear me.
No, we can hear you now. We can hear you now. We appreciate. Okay. Mike and I were doing a great job of discussing your situation of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you left us hanging at quite a critical point. So let me just kind of get back to you. You're still on. We're on the data stories. Please continue with the fact that
Okay.
you know, you're where you were at.
Okay, I hope I was at the point where I said we had to, I had to pull my team together virtually and re-gauge and recalibrate my data strategy. We have to re-look at every single initiative that we had set out to do. Everything from modernizing and categorizing reference data for the airline, which was critically important, especially in the crisis. We have to stop some work on knowledge graphing, creating a knowledge graph in order to assist various different programs from GDPR to customer engagement. We also had to drop our plans of acquiring tooling for data governance, specifically on data cataloging, because literally, simply, there was just no funds to do it. But in all of that mayhem and all of that uncertainty and, you know, deflated plans, we also found an opportunity because we were so pressed with very few resources. So we actually had to be incredibly creative, and they do say that necessity is the mother of invention. So I was looking into the use of setting up community of practices as a leverage in order to get the business interested when, of course, they were incredibly distracted about a new thing called data that could possibly help them. And I was able to accelerate that program of setting up a community of practice for data stewards because simply the thing that everybody did have is their selves and their time and their mind. And in order to set up a community where you're exchanging knowledge from experts to regular data citizens and data stewards, you had each other. And we virtually had each other sometimes almost 24 hours a day, because most people will tell you who are working remote that it seems that we're always behind our computers and we're just one click away. So we were able, even during the crisis, to get people excited about learning how to be a data steward and actually get at some of those data problems, those itchy data problems that they had been having all along. So that was actually quite an amazing experience that people were so excited. I remember giving a presentation to another department called Enterprise Analytics, and they were kind of a go-between organization between certain business functions and the data technology and innovation department, which the data governance and data strategy team resided. And there were, I think, about 60 to 70 people in that call. So I just wanted to say, in light of all of the craziness and all the darkness that was going on around us, there were some extremely good steps forward. And it's really hats off to the human spirit of resilience that was possible to happen. So we were able to still do some operational data governance foundation laying, and we were definitely able to get the message out there that data was still relevant even in a crisis, but I would say especially in a crisis. So that was a really good thing. The other points that I wanted to raise is maybe if I can ask Michael, the moderator, to go to the next slide. I'd like to look at the burning platform slides. If you can let me know. Thank you.
Yep.
I see it now. I see it. So I wanted to reflect on this. this is a diagram that I found, and I thought this is really interesting because I was trying to look for how could you describe the situation that we were in as an aviation group. And really, if you look at this slide, it's actually more reflection of a period of time before COVID. It actually does not give you the context for where we were in. So I can ask you right now, if you look at the slide, what's missing in this picture? And I can tell you that if you look at this slide on the bottom right, it says time to build a new platform for the future. So you're anticipating in our situation at the time, anticipating the worst. And for us, there was no option in terms of an opportunity to build a new platform for the future. People were really feeling gloom and mayhem. And the problem is not just that the bottom left, that the platform was in danger of burning. Literally, the platform was disintegrated. So aviation literally had to rethink itself from the core. And so what am I talking about? Another little gem that came out of the experience of being in the COVID period in an aviation group was an engagement that I had with the forecasting group within the revenue management area. And they had come very far in terms of their capability in the forecasting space. And actually, they seem to be leading in the aviation industry for the method of how they forecast. And specifically around data, that's how I engaged them. They were very keen on improving their data management capabilities. So when I spoke to them about, okay, what does COVID mean to you now from a forecasting perspective? This is a perfect example of how the whole platform disappeared for that function of forecasting. And what I mean is the industry had a way of forecasting based on trends. And obviously, if you have no future bookings, and that's the way you forecast, you would not be able to use that because the planes were simply on the ground and the bookings were deteriorating. So again, even though they had done amazing things with forecasting prior to the COVID in January, once COVID hit, they had to rethink themselves again. And fortunately, while I was there, that team pulled together and also made use of data assets, made use of algorithms and different types of data sources in order to, future-proof the forecasting function within ATIAD. And it's really an amazing feat. That particular group and I were working together on actually an article in a major business magazine, so that will still come out. So there are some good things that come from trouble and big problems. So moving right along, I'd like to go to the next slide. And I want to look now outside of my immediate situation with my data team. In the larger market, these numbers obviously don't even reflect where we are now. But I did pull these from the IATA, the aviation, the association, International Association for Aviation, and these numbers are colossal. So you have to ask yourself, how can a sector, how can a group, and not just one company, but a whole sector, recover from something like this? Well, one of the things that I noticed, and I'll talk about a good thing related to data as well. I think the aviation group, and definitely ATIAD, did a great job to communicate and try to be very transparent about the efforts put around making passengers feel not just health-wise safe, but that we had a program for awareness of wellness. And there was a whole campaign. It's very public. Of course, they want everybody to know that. And they did a very good job at that very early on compared to some of the other airlines. That campaign in itself was more of a business attempt to rethink yourself. And yes, there was different information used, but also I would say from scanning different types of data sources to make that operationally possible, I think that's something that ATIA did very well. If I reflect on something that didn't happen very well, then I would look at some of the activity of some of the various managers across the company who already didn't really practice good data management. So when people were asking for what's the number, I mean, it was a nightmare for most of the managers. So I think that it was a very, very hard knocks lesson that so many managers were not able to come up with a number with confidence in whatever number that was. And this is something that was echoed across the company in various departments. But to be fair to ATIAD, I've heard that as well from colleagues in other aviation groups, Emirates up the road, and KLM back in my home country from my friends there, but also various other industries across the world. So I think it just kind of shows everybody the incredible importance of data when things are bad and extremely ugly in an extremely bad crisis. And when things are going bad, when things are business as usual, and when things are great, the thing that is always persistently there is data. So, the more we can do to educate ourselves and make ourselves more data literate, for example, like the community of practice that I worked on with my colleagues, I think it's amazing building blocks for whatever new business model will come out of the ashes after this pandemic has subsided, hopefully. Can I ask you to go to the next slide, please? So the realistic stories that I just shared with you, I listed them down here just as a reminder. The shrinking skeleton staff was really, really painful. And it forced us to actually do data work in a better way. We were forced, even as a data team, to be more efficient and effective because we had simply less hands. So in a way, when we had things good and nobody had doom and gloom in their vision, we could kind of afford to be sloppy and maybe not do data governance and data strategy and metadata management and reference data and data quality. We didn't need to do it so well. There was no urgency. But with the crisis, we had to tighten our bootstraps and we had to be able to prove and evidence that the numbers that we were showing and the way we were working was incredibly productive. So in a way, it kind of helped us to up the game on data management. And so I was able to, with even a small team, modernize our practice in many ways. We built, data catalogs from the tools that we already had. We built data steward portals from SharePoint, Power BI, and some automatic workflows from Microsoft 365, things that we didn't even think we would even use or do when the crisis was not there. So we were able to still launch things despite all of the adversity. And that's the adoptive part of the strategy. I've spoken quite in length about the community of practice and how it galvanized people, and we were able to link that to our data steward portal in SharePoint. And we were also able to get the attention of some line managers in the business who had a sense that, you know, even in this crisis, they maybe need to pay a bit of attention to data because it was going to help them with their day-to-day operations. But things like data monetization, I must admit, I did kind of toot the horn about this extensively, but just the fact that the attention span in a certain level of the business was so much in crisis mode, it was very difficult to stand up a brand new practice. So there it was less possible, but the operational governance part, there we were able to still make moves with few people, practically no budget, and reuse of a lot of tools. And then the squeezing blood from a stone. I mean, in a lot of ways, we had to rethink how we were going to tackle our data portfolio. We also were going through an organization, a reorganization just prior to the COVID in the department that I was in. And there was also an effort to move from the old ways of doing projects to new ways with Agile. So there were a lot of moving parts with real world data stories in aviation. And I would like to now kind of move along to the next slide and talk across the aviation group in the GCC countries. So in the GCC countries, and what are those? Those are the surrounding countries around the UAE. I made that picture, so I hope that's clear. And I read a very interesting article in the Gulf Business. It's a magazine called Gulf Business here in the region. The August issue had some very interesting ideas that they were, you know, contemplating. And I mean, the first point here on this slide is about, you know, the cost-cutting measures of the airlines would simply not suffice to stop the bleeding and the hemorrhaging. I mean, I think everybody knew that outside of the aviation industry. But what was really important that came out of this article is the second and the third point, and I'll start with the second point. There is the discussion about the case for mergers across the different aviation companies in this region. Many of these aviation companies in the various countries have extremely expensive fleets. And so there's also thoughts about how could they get around economies of scale and, you know, rationalize their networks and, you know, be much more efficient with their fleets, but also even their airports. So when I think about that, and I think about how much data can contribute to making these types of decisions, whether or not to merge or not, or you know, some other, you know, way of standing up your business model, I see that there is still a lot of great potential in the UAE and in the region to raise the bar on data leadership, raise the bar on data practicing, I should say, the discipline, and to raise the bar on data literacy. Because for each and every one of those points about economies of scale and rationalizing the network and the airports and the fleet, we should be doing that in an evidence-based way to not damage the economies, because everybody knows that the airline industry was the workhorse of bringing, you know, people, products, you know, around the world. So we really need to take care of our airlines. Even though I'm no longer at Etihad, I am now at NXN, a digital native consulting firm that works on smart city. We still need a workhorse in the air, and we need to make sure that that industry does recover for private and, of course, for our business reasons and the economy. And so the third point that came out of that article is the triple whammy, which the whole aviation industry, of course, was devastated when everything got locked down. I mean, it brought tears to many people's eyes when they saw all the planes on the ground. And then that was coupled with low oil prices at the same time, and the financial markets being turbulent. And that really, really hurt the Middle East, because that triple effect, apparently, I don't know, I don't think it's ever happened before, but if it's happened before, it didn't happen to that scale. So that was quite shocking. And then if you think about, again, what role could data play on a federal level or a regional GCC cooperation level, I think there's still a lot of room for data to make a contribution here. And I really believe, and I look at now my current clients who are governmental organizations, primarily in the GCC, with smart city and smart government, I really still see there's a huge role for data to play, way beyond just opening the data of the government or sharing data among the government organizations. So I would like with that to move on to the next slide. And we're almost through my slides, so we have some time still. I wanted to turn the attention to something that people may or may not know. I am here in the United Arab Emirates, and the United Arab Emirates is definitely a pioneer in the region, and they have since 2017, they've had a ministry of AI, which is a huge thing to have a whole ministry working on AI. And you'll see around the various Emirates, that's the collage of Emirates that comprise the United Arab Emirates. Every single Emirates has a huge AI and innovation initiative. And they're very serious, and they are very, innovative and ambitious. And I noticed that just like for the airlines, all of the AI vision and missions that the different Emirates want to accomplish also have a huge dependency on data. And the good news that I wanted to bring, and we can go now to the next slide, slide 10, is that the United Arab Emirates, even since a year ago when I first started having discussions with Etihad, I noticed that there already has been a serious shift, rethinking and relooking the whole concept of how to get AI to work. Yes, there is still a lot of attention and finance put into the kind of infrastructure and the technologies around AI and IoT and innovation in general. But as I say here on the slide, there is a silent data literacy crisis going on, not just in the UAE, but in the whole world. But the point is specifically here in the UAE, with the aviation, the role of the aviation companies here that they are the steel workhorse. They bring the citizens and the business people and the tourists into the UAE, boosting the economy with tourism and also business tourism. Those aviation companies are incredibly important and are definitely highly dependent on data. And the ambition of the country to revolutionize and get them off the dependency of oil and build up a robust full infrastructure They're very ambitious and they really want to get it done, and they see AI as a key lever. I just want to say that those two elements happening at the same time, I've noticed that since last year to this year, there's been a kind of awakening where I see more placements for chief data officers, where before you would only see different types of titles like heads of data. There's also a bigger push from each of the Emirates to have more data initiatives and also data regulation. But in all of those, that effort and that beginning of awareness, I would still say there is a silent data literacy crisis, meaning that we have a lot of work to do as the International Society for CDOs, not just to help our chief data officers around the world get educated and get impactful to businesses and governments and our society, but we also have a lot of data literacy education for our data citizens and all of our data practitioners around the world, including the UAE. Because I do believe that the dream that the UAE has for AI is highly achievable. I just feel that if they understand, if the nation understands the incredible importance of data and the role of data literacy in order to achieve their Vision 2030, then I think that they will be an outstanding country and truly a beacon for the world. So with that being said, I wanted to close my presentation and then open the floor for questions and, of course, discussion.
Hey, Althea, thank you very much indeed. I don't know whether there was anything to talk about on the Emirate race to AI, or whether you just wanted me to go straight to the kind of ending slide. But we do have a couple of questions that have come up if you're open to helping us, a little bit further. The first question that's come up, the first question that's come up is that, and it directly relates to your experience. In your opinion, how do you suggest we being CDOs, position our role as indispensable and absolutely essential for the organization so that we don't end up being part of staff reductions?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's really rubber to the road. I totally understand the question. And it's something, like I said, my advice is you will have to dig deep, meaning the organization that you are currently in, you must understand what makes and breaks that business. You must understand what is the prevalence, let's say, what has the attention of the executives, what has the attention of the departments that have the biggest say, the core business. If you can understand not the language, the full, function or whatever they do, but if you can understand, what is important to them and how can you attach yourself to that important thing, meaning either solving their problem with the help of data and showing the link between their problem and the contribution of data and data practice to help relieve their pain or get a particular outcome, then I think you have a very, very strong case to demonstrate to enough people that you and your team are important and essential for not just the survival, but that their company or that department can thrive. So actually, by addressing that, very precisely, you won't have to beat your own drum. They will be beating the drum for you. And I don't want to try to act like that is a small task. It is not. But I do feel that if you are strategic in your effort, and you choose a few friendly or, let's say, approachable business people and find out how to make yourself relevant and impactful, with a little bit of help, of course, with their cooperation, I think you can make the case. I hope I've answered the question.
Oh, yes. I mean, and it seems that it's fair to say that relationship building is critical for the role of the CDO, and leveraging the relationships to help bring a better business outcome to the key constituents that you're sharing. So thank you for that, Althea. I do have another question, and we've heard this one a lot. So this is one that we're hoping we can delve into. We got a question from the audience. I'd like to hear more about the details of the data literacy program. Specifically, what key elements need to be addressed?
Okay, so data literacy is a very interesting one. First of all, data literacy is not one size fits all. And what I mean by that, when people think about data literacy, they think usually about, I am going to educate the data steward to be able to do to execute their role. Absolutely, that is an essential part of operational data governance and making it work. However, I think that if you do not do certain things in tandem, so yes, create some kind of training, on the job use cases that are relevant for the data stewards, give them tangible techniques and tools and a workflow and some performance monitoring in the direction you want them to go. That's the literacy for the data stewards, absolutely. But do not forget about their bosses, meaning the data owners and the executive sponsors of your data program. Because those people, they have a different role. They are the ones, so the executive sponsor, in my mind, the literacy that needs to happen there is a type of mentoring and coaching into a higher level of understanding of the importance of data, so that that person, he or she, can support the overall initiative and the journey for the firm. And what that means, support, is that they are the champion for everything, that they endorse it, that they support it with funds and people, and allowing it to be in the spotlight. And that data literacy, in terms of understanding their role, is just as important as a senior executive understanding that there is a critical difference between, that there is, let's say, a difference between something like governance at a very high level and, let's say, analytics at a very high level. So I think you need to tailor the data literacy to the audience, to the actual role, the role within the organization. And the other point that I wanted to stress is, I mentioned the community of practice. We were going through an agile transformation. And mind you, I have had a lot of experience with agile organizations in the Netherlands. I think it's like by default agile, a lot of big companies in the Netherlands. But community of practice is not something that's unique to agile transformations or agile way of working. However, they've been used many times by various different industries who really want to disseminate knowledge in a very natural, non-invasive way. And I would definitely say a tool of, getting at data literacy, I would advise all of you on the call to look at and do some research on the concept of a community of practice, because it addresses many of the pains that a lot of organizations are going through because they are doing agile, and it just seems that a lot of things are focused on the product in the moment, while community of practice is something that's ongoing for as long as the community feels it's necessary and helps to disseminate that knowledge. So I would say data literacy can be done formally, like certifications and courses, which I definitely did with my team, but it can also be done as an on-the-job training. We also did just very practically put video recording in workflows, so that when somebody was doing a workflow, they could click on a presentation and get an instruction on what is this about and what do I need to do. So kind of having like a robot monitors helping people even when the governance people weren't there with them. So it's all those types of practical things that you can do. And I think that we need to be very innovative when it comes to data literacy, and we need to make it fun. I mean, I had a plan to even introduce gamification to help with data literacy, but because of our funds problem, we were not able to do it. But I encourage all of you to do it, and trust me, I will be doing it at my new firm, NXN, with my team and my clients. So I hope I've answered your question.
Absolutely. I got our person who thanked you for the perspective. Just a last question, because we're heading up on the hour here, Althea, and this one's related to what's on the screen, the Emirate race to AI. So if we acknowledge that the UAE is pushing, has a push towards AI, is there an equivalent push to ensure the ethics basis of the capabilities will also be delivered around the same time? So more of a question on the yin and the yang, AI is a good thing, but is there ethics tied to the growth?
Yes, okay. So I'll deal with that quickly because I see we only have a couple of minutes. Excellent. I'm very much a purporter of, data ethics. Myself, I sat on the first data ethics committee at the ING Bank about 2 years ago, and I feel it's incredibly relevant. So to answer your question very directly, no, that is not at the forefront of people's minds here, but I do feel that there are pockets. So I have been speaking, for example, to people who are legal counsel, or people who are in compliance, who are also talking about, we need to do more about data ethics. I do think that as we get more experience and put AI into practice here in the UAE, that this will become more of a topic. I'm not trying to say that we don't use AI. We use a ton of AI. Actually, I'm sitting here talking to you, and my robot vacuum cleaner is cleaning the floors in another room. So I just want to say they are using here in the UAE a lot of AI, but we haven't come to that point yet where there's an open discussion about data ethics as it relates to the use of advanced analytics and AI and robotics and all those other things. So I do think it's early days, but it will come because the market is maturing very fast. Why? I think just because COVID has just put everything into fast gear. I saw an article, this is my last comment, I saw an article, who is your digital transformation officer now? And the answer was COVID, meaning COVID was pushing harder than the people who were in the lead. So anyway, I hope I've answered your question.
Althea, first of all, thank you for your time. I know that's late in the evening over in the United Arab Emirates. Second of all, congratulations on being recognized as a global country CDO ambassador. That's going to be a great sort of boon for the program and for the community of practice locally there as well. And thirdly, we apologize for the somewhat of the audio interruptions, but by and large, I think that yours is a personal story that that we hope that not a lot of CDOs have to go through, but if they have to, and then what you have taken away from it and what you can and how you position is absolutely fantastic. So on behalf of the International Society of Chief Data Officers, thank you very much indeed for your time. This has been a wonderful update, and we look forward to seeing you on subsequent calls. And let me just ask Mike and Peter, any other parting comments for Althea?
From my perspective, no. I think we could have gone on with questions well into Althea's not so much late evening but night as a result of that chat, which I found very interesting and very engaging. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much, Richard.
Yep,
sorry,
you're welcome.
Mike and Robert.
That's okay. I answer it to everything. Just don't call me late for dinner. Althea, thanks very much indeed. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And we will be in touch. And Althea, do you get any last comments from you? I'll give you the last word.
No, I just would, well, actually, yes, I would love to come back and speak about data and the data offering for smart cities with NXM. So I would really like to do that as the current director of the data practice there. I would love to do that.
March.
Yeah, could be something we can look at. So we certainly will take that nomination and consider it. Althea, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for our audience. Thank you for your time, and we'll be in touch with our next webcast. I believe our next webcast, I think we've got 2 coming up in October. Keep an eye out for the emails and LinkedIn and our